My name is Christopher Barnes. I'm the co-founder of the High Mountain Institute in Leadville, Colorado. We're a semester school. We strive to merge academics, wilderness, and small intentional community. I also spent 8 years on our local school board, a couple of them as the president, and I have a third and fifth grader in our local schools. Today, I want to talk to you a little bit about the merits of risk in education. And to start, let's think a little bit about why we might want to teach these 21st century skills, or whatever we want to call them. I guess the world's full of complicated problems. Challenges such as global warming are anything but trivial. Once upon a time, we lived in a flat world, and then we discovered that it was round. And then now we learned from Thomas Friedman that actually the world's flat. And we had one tsunami roll ashore in Japan and shut down most of the auto parts industry for want of a handful of high-tech parts. We live in a world of global interconnected financial markets where the solvency of one small country, a continent away, can affect us here, today. Now, I don't know whether a flat world will be better or worse, but I do suspect that it will be different. Challenges such as our insatiable demand for oil led one company to mismanage the risks of drilling for oil. And now, for the next century, we'll all at least pause before we eat an oyster from the Gulf of Mexico. Desire, hubris, these are pretty ineffective levers of control for solving problems, making decisions. So what's our role as educational leaders in this? Well, the next generation, like all those before it, is charged with saving the world, and your job is to prepare them for that task. So how are we going to teach these skills? Critical thinking, problem solving, communication, leadership, followership, mentorship, adaptability. Where are they going to learn these skills? I believe that it's in experiential environments where they can practice these skills, not just theoretically. It sort of defies logic that we could teach these skills without an increased commitment to experiential education. So I believe unabashedly that real challenge leads to real experience, which leads to real learning. John Dewey would be very proud of us today. And it would be very convenient if we could simply set aside the risk component of all this, but we can't. And the reason is that risk is married to experience. So risk is pretty commonly defined as the likelihood of an undesirable outcome multiplied by the severity of an undesirable outcome. So what's that mean? Well, when you drove here today, I hope you all chose to drive at or at least near the speed limit. And I hope that you all chose to wear a seatbelt to decrease the severity in the event that there was an accident. So too, a rock climber might choose to use an automatic belay device to automatically grab the rope in the event that somebody fell. But just in case, everybody wears a helmet. So too in our classrooms, as we strive to manage the risk of students not learning the material of a given unit, we might craft careful lesson plans, write the essential questions up on the board, right? And just in case, we might do higher frequency evaluation to catch students before they fall too far. This is all Risk Management 101. It's pretty basic stuff, and it is simple right up until it isn't. So let me tell you a story. A couple years ago, my son Jack, 6 years old at the time, came home from school with stranger danger on the tip of his tongue. That was his essential learning for the day in school. Now, at least initially, I was thrilled. My son had gone to school. He'd learned this little mnemonic. He came back a little less likely to show up on a milk carton. What's not to love as a parent? But then, on further reflection, as I considered a life lived where every person you meet who you don't know, a stranger, is first and foremost evaluated as a threat, a danger. Is this the path forward for which we're going to create tomorrow's global citizens and leaders? Is it on that list of 21st century skills? Ronald Reagan said, trust, but verify, when faced with nuclear Armageddon and the Red Menace. Even he recognized we should start with trust. So what's the point? Well, on the basis of fears like stranger danger, we see the percentage of children who walk or ride their bike to school every day declining precipitously over 40 years. And over the same time period, we see a pretty significant increase in children who are overweight or obese. Now, I can't speak to correlation versus causation here, but it certainly begs some interesting questions. It may well be that stranger danger has helped us to mitigate the risks and decrease the number of childhood abductions at a cost of more childhood obesity. Which is worse? Who's asking these questions and advocating for this dialogue? For that matter, where exactly is the evidence that, barring the obvious extremes, that safer environments are intrinsically better and lead to a higher quality of life in the long term? I'm worried. I'm worried that all those skate park grommets covered head to toe in pads, I'm worried that are they developing a safety mentality or a gladiator mentality? Here in Colorado, a lot of people go skiing. We see the increased prevalence in the use of helmets. It's irrefutable that if you're going to stop yourself while skiing with your head against a tree, a helmet's a highly advisable piece of equipment. But with this increased use in helmets, we're not seeing a commensurate decrease in fatalities in skiing. So why? Because more is not always better. More safety, more equipment, more signage isn't necessarily better. I have a concern that I'll bet many of us share. All of those soft surface playgrounds and the ubiquitous availability of hand sanitizer adds up to sanitized experiences that are in some way diminished. If you look up safe in the dictionary, the definition is free from harm. So if we want to keep our students safe, we cannot expose them to any activities that contain any risks, because we can't ensure that we can keep them free from harm. Now, I work at a school that proudly boasts that we are an unsafe school. We do some risky stuff like go rock climbing, where in our industry we see about 0.5 injuries per 1,000 program days. So what? Well, let's compare that to some other sort of common activities to give it some relevance. How about the cheerleading squad during practice, where they have 1 injury per 1,000 athlete exposures, but twice as risky? High school soccer, 2+ injuries per 1,000 athlete exposures, about 4 times as risky. And under the Friday night lights for the big football game, 12 injuries per 1,000 athlete exposures, somewhere on the magnitude of 24 times as risky as institutional rock climbing. Now, I'm not here to indict any of these activities. Quite on the contrary, they all have real merits and benefits. I am here to advocate for a dialogue where we consider those benefits in light of the risks. Our jobs as educational leaders is to maximize the good stuff, those environments and activities where the benefits outweigh the risks, and to minimize those environments where the risks outweigh the benefits. Now, if you want to climb the high peaks of our state, it comes with a risk of exposure to lightning. You cannot eliminate that risk without eliminating the benefit. So our job is to advocate for prudent and mindful risk-taking, not the elimination of risk. And in doing so, we get to trumpet and glorify failure in all its glory. We all know as educators that a failed science lab is a great opportunity to learn and a tremendous example of the scientific method in action. So too, a failed charter school illuminates to us new educational ideas that don't work. A bankrupt independent school reveals a value proposition that people won't pay for. So I believe that success without a legitimate threat of failure is illegitimate. We need to set our students up to succeed and to fail in nearly equal measures. This is why No Child Left Behind is never going to work. It's analogous to a Lake Wobegon reality where all the children are above average and where difference, diversity, high achievement are all crushed inside the mean. Now, I work with pretty high-achieving kids, but many of them come to us without the commensurate high level of self-confidence. Why? For many of them, failure is not an option, because they've simply never been exposed to it. So sheltered are their lives. And for those children and those youth trapped in failure, be it of their own making or of the system and society around them, they certainly deserve the opportunity to succeed more than any. But that won't work either without a continued opportunity to fail. So what are we going to do about this? If it's our job to prepare the next generation with the skills they need for the future, and doing so requires a renewed and increased commitment to experiential opportunities that are married to risk, then we're all going to have to get into the risk management business. Now, at our school, we expose our students to risk mindfully and prudently manage those risks because it teaches skills like prudence and mindfulness. And these are skills that are very hard to teach any other way. So if we can agree there can be no A's and B's without the commensurate D's and F's, that failure legitimizes success, or at least the potential of failure legitimizes success, then those environments where failure is not an option are the same ones where everybody gets a ribbon and no one knows the joys of a well-earned success. Now, here in Colorado, we have a statewide assessment system, TCAP. My kids have been taking the tests all week. And I remember being a school board member in a district with some pretty challenged schools, including some failing schools. And it didn't take long to realize that the threats of a state takeover of our schools were hollow at best because we were shielded and protected from failure and from success. The charter school movement is full of dramatic successes and failures. we can learn from both. Colorado independent schools are a rich source of functional practices and learnings because they live in a kind of Darwinian world where families vote on school efficacy via true school choice and annual fund donations. So, what are we going to do to actually teach these skills? The answer is actually very simple in theory and really challenging in practice. That's what we're learning here today. So, we need to give our students real problems to solve, where they have to think critically and collaborate in small teams, where they have to lead and follow and communicate with one another. They have to communicate their findings to the outside world, access and analyze information along the way, and they're certainly going to need profound levels of creativity and entrepreneurial drive, not only to learn these skills, but to also begin to solve the problems of the future. So we're all faced with making major life decisions, important decisions, both personally and professionally, in an environment of uncertainty, using data of dubious quality. Where and how are our students going to learn to make these kinds of decisions? Is it via decision-making class? Or the perfectly crafted curriculum with the perfectly crafted essential learnings of the perfectly crafted essential 21st century skills? I think they'll need the theory. I believe that. But I think what they really need is practice. So at our school, we use the fear of getting lost to inspire and motivate our students to pay attention and to learn to read the map. Now, we do live in the age of the GPS, and I am not here to advocate that map reading should be the 8th item on Tony Wagner's list of 21st century essential survival skills. However, here's what I know. I know that out there in the wilderness and inside the very real experience of navigating yourself and your peers from point A to point B, therein lies a powerful and functional metaphor of finding oneself, of solving a seemingly complex problem for the collective good, and of persevering through to resolution. So I believe risk has a starring role in education, and that improper allegiance to safety imperils learning. Now, you start to think about risk a bit, and it starts to have consequences that go beyond the individual student and classroom. As we all race to the top, there are going to be some winners and losers of that race. Those of us at the back of the pack are going to have to learn from our own failures and the successes of others. Like them or not, we got to think deeply about those Seattle school teachers who risked their very jobs in refusing to implement a statewide testing scheme that looked pretty similar to Colorado's. We can all appreciate ColoradoSchoolGrades.com and all of their billboards, and at the same time challenge a methodology that has a fetish for rankings over school improvement and doesn't really take into account economic resources and community affluence. So, let's lead the way. Let's find the path forward to give our students the kinds of skills they need for the future. And in doing so, we have to recognize that we're going to have to increase our commitment to experiential education. And that means that since experience is married to risk, we're going to have to all think deeply and put risk and safety into its proper and rightful place. We're going to have to think carefully about the true benefits and risks of the activities we engage in, both real and perceived. When you get back to the office tomorrow and you start to process everything you've learned here today, distill it and make meaning of all this, I hope that you will first and foremost be brave. That you will seek out those opportunities that are real challenges, that lead to real experiences, that lead to real learning for our students, our teachers, our schools, and our communities. Very few Americans will ever go to the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge in Alaska. So why is it that a majority of Americans think, let's not drill for oil there? It's because they believe such places simply must exist. Aldo Leopold, one of the founders of modern ecology, said, "To what avail are 40 freedoms without a blank spot on the map?" So too, risk needs advocates. We have to join together and consider how we can best implement risk-taking in our schools and our educational environments. I hope that we can all join together to prudently and mindfully advocate for risk in our educational system. Thank you very much.